China, Russia, and Rwanda. With a research background in reliability of solar PV modules, he has published around 15 research articles in internationally acclaimed journals. Now, I would like to request Mr. Pulipaka to take over the session.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Very good morning to all of you who are here in person and who are joining virtually. We are very happy to have with us an esteemed list of panelists who will talk about the pathway of green hydrogen in India. But before that, we also have a very important and interesting message from our chairman, who is joining us virtually all the way from the United States. So I would request the team to play the video of our chairman, Mr. Pranav R. Mehta.
Our own Mrs. Gauri Singh, the Deputy Director General of IRENA, the Ambassador of EU to India, His Excellency Honorable Chief Guest, our own Mrs. Gauri Singh, the Deputy Director General of IRENA, the Ambassador of EU to India, His Excellency Hugo Estuto, Sri Deepak Gupta, former Eminary Secretary, our source of inspiration and our Honorary Director General at the National Solar Energy Federation of India, and who is also the architect of India's Jawaharlal Nehru Solar National Solar Mission, Part 1, which he implemented also. Sri Dinesh Jagdale, Joint Secretary Eminary, who will be the chief guest at the release function of the PV cycle report jointly prepared by with the support of EU in India, as also Eminary, then Solar Power Europe, and the National Solar Energy Federation of India. Sri Pradeep Kumar Das, CMD IREDA, and Sri Jyoti Lal, IAS, Principal Secretary of the Government of Kerala, industry luminaries and speakers like Sri Upadhyay, Chairman of ACME Group, Sri Sujoy Ghosh of First Solar, Sri Sunil Badesra of Sangro Inverters, all of whom are our esteemed members of NSCFI, Sri Hitesh Doshi, Chairman of the Vari Group, our friends and speakers from abroad, Solar Power Europe, Mr. Mete Aziz, and Klinke of PV Cycle Group, and all of you friends, exhibitors like Raman Bhatia and all others. At the outset, I must recall our long association with the Exhibitions India Group and late Sri Prem Behel, who was in true spirit the front runner and pioneer in organizing RE events in India. Our special thanks to Mrs. Gauri Singh, the chief guest today, who is the Deputy Director General of IRENA, for kindly accepting our invitation, in fact, my personal invitation. So I thank her on behalf of the organizers, that is ITPO, Exhibitions India, NSFEI, and on my own personal behalf. Friends, when we are meeting today, we are meeting at an important juncture of energy transition worldwide. The energy transition is taking place at a rapid rate. Solar is rapidly growing from gigawatts to terawatts. Uh, Similarly, wind energy, biomass, waste to energy, all the fields, there is a great amount of progress in getting more and more adapted. So as much as growth is taking place, so much spread is also taking place. And at the IRENA Coalition for Action, we are talking of 100% renewable energy. Earlier, we were talking of 100% RE by 2050. But recently, at a very important event at UAE, all the technical and other leaders said that we must advance this 100% RE. So, as usual, the technocrats are accelerating, putting pressure, on the pedal by saying that 100% RE is possible by 2035. And there has been a declaration signed by the leading people like Fraunhofer and many others. Similarly, advanced storage technology is also making rapid strides, which is not only for the electricity sector, but also for the transport sector, the EV.
Thank you very much, sir, for your welcome remarks. With this, I would like to welcome the esteemed panelists once again. We are at an interesting juncture of India's renewable energy journey, and without any doubt, green hydrogen is going to play an important role, be it decarbonizing end-use sector, be it giving impetus to the much needed and already cheaper and grid parity achieved renewables. Hydrogen is going to be the game changer. So without much ado, we will begin today's interesting and enthralling discussion on the pathway to green hydrogen economy in India. To begin with, I would like to request our Honorary Director General, Shri Deepak Gupta IAS, to deliver welcome remarks. Deepak Gupta IAS retired as a former MNRE Secretary and served as UPSC Chairman and is currently the Honorary Director General of NSE-FI. He retired in 2011 as Secretary MNRE, where he presided over the conceptualization and implementation of India's first Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. After retirement, he consulted with World Bank, UNIDO, and you often see him and read him writing on issues related to energy and sustainable development. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, and friends, very welcome to this session. This is only going to be a small beginning of many more to come, I think, for the next 50 years. I am delighted to welcome Gauri to this session from IRENA. She was Joint Secretary, as Mr. Mehta said, when in MNRE, when the solar mission was started, and she worked very hard to make it a success and to lay the foundation of solar power growth in India. And I look forward to her contribution through IRENA for development of hydrogen. And as far as IRENA is concerned, I look forward to their continuously producing updated reports, bringing knowledge of best practices to all on a dynamic basis, providing a platform for technological collaboration in a real spirit of obligation of developed countries to the climate change negotiations. Provide, I think, a somewhat neglected aspect for technical training to develop crucial expertise in all related areas of hydrogen, opportunities and pathways as may be available for different countries and different regions of the world. So in the last few months, I have been doing extensive reading on hydrogen, including the very good recent report of IRENA. But I'm a non-expert, and as a non-expert, I must honestly admit to be quite confused at the complexity of the journey to a hydrogen economy. Many developed countries have brought out ambitious hydrogen targets and strategies, but kick-starting the process here is not going to be easy. So I will just raise a few issues based on discussions which I've had with some of my colleagues. And I feel, just as we did at the solar mission start, that we should be not developing a hype. We should be ambitious but realistic, adopt a step-by-step approach with a judicious mix of learnings in the short and medium terms, even as we prepare from now only for the long term, which may be 2040 or 2050. Now, as Subbu mentioned, green hydrogen is likely to be the future, but it is suggested that it will be largely produced by electrolysis through use of renewable energy, which will be essentially solar and wind. Now, if solar and wind are also expected to replace coal to produce electricity and to charge batteries to provide 24 by 7 power, as also for all electric mobility requirements, then the capacity for solar and wind that we will have to develop will become very, very large. And this may become a limitation, where therefore we have to find where is the land and water which will enable us to have this capacity, which we should start looking now and reserving it. And then how that production from those centers will be transported to these demand areas. And secondly, what kind of indigenous manufacturing system we will have to set up across the entire solar chain. This won't happen in a jiffy. So if we have to plan for it. Now it is expected that electrolyzers will become very cheap. Now most are being manufactured in Europe or in other developed countries. How do we start their manufacture in India? Maybe through their Indian subsidiaries or by joint ventures with large Indian companies. Secondly, how do we create demand for their use? Slowly at first, but increasing steadily. Now, in a coal-rich country where coal mines will close after many years, how can we use coal gasification along with carbon capture to promote hydrogen? This perhaps may become an important issue. Similarly, for countries like India, with huge availability of biomass, we need to examine its potential to produce biomethane and then go on to use for hydrogen. In fact, I think the whole area of bioenergy in India needs to be revitalized. It's early days to consider how the gas pipeline infrastructure could be used, but this is the time to project or to rule out its possibility. We must plan years ahead. Then do we try to use hydrogen for hard to electrify and abate industries like steel or cement, etc., or even initially use different colors of hydrogen to create demand and experience, or whether green ammonia or even green steel can be exported, whether we should put millions of dollars in fundamental research to identify and focus in those aspects which may be most relevant for India and countries like India. And which are these elements? And then how do we work in a collaborative way rather than just work in silos? I don't think small achievements are going to be of great use. And so path breaking or cutting edge is what we have to look for. One doesn't hear much about this. We have not done enough in solar research. We're still trying to look for battery research. And so hydrogen is a new area for this. Finally, could we have some demonstration projects to determine the feasibility of possible transport applications and solutions? Mr. Jyoti Lal will speak about the efforts of Kerala government. There is a talk of fuel cell-based mobility system from the upcoming Jewar International Airport to Greater Noida or to Delhi Airport. Could the new airport design lead to enough solar to produce a hydrogen green at source? Could the new Delhi-Mumbai proposed highway be enabled to produce hydrogen to be dispensed along the route through biomass and for trucks to be tried out to run on fuel cells? I think we need to consider such projects and be able to help finance them. And the problem of chicken and egg will come because vehicles will be manufactured and fueling stations started only if there is a demand for them. How do we create the demand? So we have to use hydrogen in the future, but my point is that we should move discussion away from generalities to specifics, raise issues and study each issue intensively on a continuing basis so that we can learn and gradually move forward. as also simultaneously develop research and manpower requirements in a concentrated way. Even the MNRE may require a hydrogen expert, for example. Our proposed NSFI hydrogen coalition will hopefully look at these aspects and form subgroups which look at each of the issues that I have raised or others will, so that we can make our journey ahead a little easier and a little certain. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Like you mentioned, we are very happy that at NSCFI, we are going to launch the National Green Hydrogen Coalition. And I hope we'll have the same esteemed set of panelists at the launch event also. But without much delay, I'm very happy to invite the chief guest of today, Shri Gauri Singh, the Deputy Director General of International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Ms. Singh brings more than 30 years of experience in policy, advocacy and project implementation within the field of renewable energy and sustainable development for India as well as the international system. Prior to joining IRENA, she worked with the India's federal government and at the apex level within the provincial government. Federally, she was responsible for leading the development of National Solar Mission of India policy in 2010, an early policy framework designed to drive solar power development across the country, and now we are all witness to the success of National Solar Mission. At the Madhya Pradesh government, Ms. Singh stayed rural development, providing strategic planning and implementation guidance across the state for large initiatives. She led livelihood projects based on decentralized renewable energy solutions to support rural artisans and ran an ambitious intervention to restore the flow of 40 rivers across the state based on the use of remote sensing maps. She also played a key role in drafting the framework for the State Right to the Water Act. Prior to that, she was the Director, Country Support and Partnerships at IRENA, where she was responsible for regional and country-level initiatives and for spearheading partnerships with regional energy and economic organizations. I would like to thank Ms. Gauri Singh for accepting this request on behalf of Exhibitions India Group and NSCFI, and I would like to request her to deliver chief guest remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Subramaniam, and thank you so much for inviting me to this very important session today. I would like to, first of all, thank Mr. Pranav Mehta for inviting me here. Also, I'd like to thank Mr. Deepak Gupta for his very kind words. So, all the esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen, my idea was to first talk a little bit about a recently launched preview by IRENA on the World Energy Transitions Outlook. This was launched just a few days back, and it showcases an ambitious, though technically and economically feasible pathway for deploying low carbon technologies to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade and bringing the carbon dioxide emissions to net zero by mid-century. As many of us would have read, the IPCC's special report on global warming in 2018 indicated that we need to have a 45% reduction in global greenhouse emissions from 2010 levels by 2030. But what we've seen is that emissions have continued to rise, except, last year was obviously a exception with the pandemic slowing down the economies. But indications are that this is obviously rebounding very fast. So the premise of the 1.5 scenario that has been developed by IRENA is that the carbon emissions need to fall by 3.5% year on year to reach net zero by 2050. Renewables will play a key role in the decarbonization. And it's expected that 90% of the solutions in 2050 would involve renewable energy through direct supply and electrification, energy efficiency, green hydrogen, and biomass with CCS. We've already seen that in many parts of the world, renewable energy is the least cost source of new electricity, and over 50% of the utility scale capacity which is being added now costs less than the cheapest new coal option. We are in fact moving into an era of increasingly electrified energy system, and what that means is that electricity will become the major energy carrier with over 50% share of total final energy use in 2050, which is, if you compare it with what it is today, it's about 21%. And 90% of the electricity, it is projected, will come from renewables in 2050. So when we're looking at these kind of projections, we're not looking at technologies that are not proven or technically feasible now. This is a projection based on technologies that are already available. And the falling cost of renewable power generation has led to renewable energy technologies dominating the new generation capacity. And in fact, even last year, it is estimated that we would have added about 200 gigawatts of renewable energy. The other thing that's very interesting that's happening is that the electrification of transport is showing a disruptive transition as well. And EVs today account for nearly 4.2% of the new vehicle sale globally. And what we are looking at is that electrification of end users will drive increased power demand, which would hopefully be met with renewables as we move forward. Now, coming to hydrogen, I think it's very clear that hydrogen is going to be a key part of the future energy systems. We would have heard, and we've all heard, 30 countries which represent a major part of the global GDP have committed to net zero in the coming decades. And as more countries pursue deep decarbonization strategies, hydrogen will have a very critical role to play. This will be particularly so when we're talking of, where we are looking at harder to abate sectors, such as steel, chemicals, long-haul transport, shipping, aviation. And in this context, hydrogen needs to be low carbon at the outset, ultimately green. It's being produced by electrolysis of water using renewable electricity. So hydrogen, we estimate, will offer a solution to energy demand that is hard to directly electrify in industry and transport, mitigating close to 12% emissions in industry and 26% in the transport sector. In the 1.5 degree scenario that has been presented by Irina recently. By 2050, 30% of the electricity used will be dedicated to green hydrogen production and its derivatives like ammonia and methanol. And this is really to also answer some of the very important questions that have been raised by Mr. Deepak Gupta. Because what we are looking at is a scenario where hydrogen and its derivatives together will account for 13% of the total final energy use. And if we look at the energy demand that would be required for producing hydrogen, it's estimated that it would be close to 21,000 terawatt hours by 2050, which putting it in perspective, is almost the level of global electricity consumption today. So, which then obviously means that there has to be a very significant scale up of not just electrolyzers manufacturing capacity and deployment, but also you're looking at a very huge scale up of renewable energy to be able to meet the kind of demand that is required. The estimation is that green hydrogen can be produced at a competitive cost with blue hydrogen by 2030, with renewable electricity costing about 20 megawatt hours, 20 US dollar megawatt hours. And if a rapid scale up continues, it is expected that green hydrogen will possibly fall below USD 1.5 kilogram, and that I think will be what we know as really bringing a huge scale up in the production of green hydrogen. But currently, we produce globally only about 120 metric tons of hydrogen, and almost all of this comes from fossil fuels. And with I think the green hydrogen percentage is 1%, just about 1%. So as electrolyzers cost fall, because electrolyzer cost, along with the cost of electricity, are the two very critical cost components in green hydrogen. We expect that green hydrogen will be at many locations cost competitive to blue hydrogen in the next 5 to 15 years. I also want to highlight here that there is in Japan, the world's largest green hydrogen production plant of 10 megawatt electrolyzer capacity began operation recently. And it's expected that the first plant producing ammonia from green hydrogen is also expected to go online this year. Hydrogen as a commodity for trade, while it's very nascent, but hydrogen could definitely become the clean energy vector, making it possible to tap into ample remote, low-cost renewable energy resources, which I think is a very important development that can have geopolitical implications as well. So very recently, as last year, 8 countries around the world have announced their hydrogen strategies, and 10 more are expected to do so in this year. So beside regulation and market design, what is important is that the places where there's low-cost electricity, that has become pretty much a necessary condition for producing competitive green hydrogen. And if you look at the recently inaugurated solar park at Kutch, that which has a capacity which over the years would be about 10 gigawatts of solar. These are the kind of places which will produce electricity, renewable energy electricity at very low cost. In many countries, right now, they're more at the strategy stage, and they're still finalizing the policy, specific and concrete policy measures. And I'll just give you some examples of how the thinking is developing. In Japan, which was one of the earlier supporters of hydrogen, has already translated its strategy into concrete cost and efficiency targets. We know that Japan has a paucity of land, so their strategy is primarily aiming to achieve cost parity with competing fuels such as gasoline and liquid natural gas in power generation by promoting or doing jointly multiple projects which are coming up in Australia, Saudi Arabia, Brunei, and others, because For Japan, import is going to be a large part of the strategy. Australia and Chile, for example, have opted for ambitious cost targets. In fact, Australia has launched the H2 under 2 target, which is to bring the production cost of hydrogen to below 2 Australian dollars per kilo. And that, in fact, has already triggered off almost 370 million Australian dollars of state support. Chile is a very interesting example because their main strategy around hydrogen is export. Chile has some of the best renewable resources in the world, both in solar. They have a desert in the north, and also the wind, which is in Patagonia and south. And electricity costs are from solar and wind are expected to reduce further and maybe half by mid-century. So their strategy is around export, and they have set for themselves a target of US dollar 1.5 kilo of hydrogen by 2030, and they aim to become the cheapest in the world. The EU, for example, has also set a very ambitious target of 40 gigawatts by 2030, and it's been supported by targets from countries like France, Netherlands, and Germany, Portugal, and Spain. But they do know that they're also in talks with North Africa, countries in North Africa, to put out 40 gigawatts of electrolysis and electrolyzer plants. So it's very important that when we look at the scenario in India, and when the Honorable Prime Minister announced the plan to launch the National Hydrogen Energy Mission, which pretty much buttresses the green credentials of the country, it's already being seen as a very complementary part of the policy framework to the already announced targets of 450 gigawatts. Now, in India, it's a different scenario from Europe, where Europe, it's mostly about substituting one source for the other. But in India, as you know, our per capita consumption of electricity is still around 1,200 units per year. And there is a scope for growth as we have moved into electrifying our villages and all our households. So there will be a growth in the demand of electricity. So the situation here is very different from what it is in some of the developed world. And how the growth in demand for electricity gets met by the cheaper sources of renewable energy that are now available is going to be pretty much a precursor to our policy framework for green hydrogen. The other thing about green hydrogen, and I think Deepak Gupta ji pointed out, that this is not it's not a linear mission. This is a mission that has to be evolved through a very coordinated effort of many ministries which are involved. So it's the Ministry of Renewable Energy, Ministry of Power, Ministry of Petroleum, Ministry of Fertilizer, Ministry of Transport. So there has to be a coordinated effort to be able to push this very ambitious national hydrogen energy vision that is being planned ahead. Clearly, the signals for the industry to invest in electrolyzer manufacturing plants has to be given in the policy itself, and I'm sure Deepak Gupta ji would remember that when the solar mission was starting off, there was a 30% local content, which was pretty much there to boost the manufacturing of solar panels in India. And so we need to make sure that given our skills in frugal engineering, and now with a very solid manufacturing base we have, need to make sure that we keep the momentum for manufacturing of electrolyzers in India, and because that will be a very important foundation that we will build through this mission that's coming through. And I would just like to say that maybe the policy framework would also have elements like the RPO mechanism, which played a very important role in the solar mission, because even in this segment, we have very large fertilizer companies like PSUs, which definitely have to also move along this path that the framework for the hydrogen energy mission will come out with. So all in all, I am told that the consultations have already happened, and there is a draft that's getting prepared. So I think all of us will be really looking forward to the policy draft, because it will lay the foundation for the next 30-40 years of the way green hydrogen would grow in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gauri Singh. We fully agree with you that as the electrolyzer costs fall down and electricity costs also scale down, it will be a game-changing factor for green hydrogen. And I'm very happy to mention that as NSCFI, we are very active part of IRENA Coalition for Action. We actively participate in the End-Use Decarbonizing Sector Working Group, which is coming up with very good and innovative reports on hydrogen. And hopefully we are also going to start a new working group on the energy, water, food nexus of agri-renewables. But I would like to thank you once again for your remarks. Now we have Mr. Jyotilal IAS, who is the Principal Secretary of Transport, General Administrative Department of Government of Kerala. He holds a degree of Bachelor in Technology in Chemical Engineering from IIT Madras and an MBA from ICFI University Hyderabad. He is an Indian Administrative Services Officer of 1993 batch of Kerala cadre and has served in various departments of the Government of Kerala, including Land Revenue Management and District Administration, Fisheries, Agriculture Corporation, Information Technology, Food, Civil Supplies, and Consumer Affairs, and other known departments. I personally very much know Mr. Jyotilal has been spearheading the green hydrogen movement in Kerala and ensuring that Kerala will lead India in becoming a green hydrogen economy. And I would like to request him to share his experiences from the Kerala story on how green hydrogen proliferation is happening in Kerala. Mr. Jyotilal.
Thank you, Mr. Subramaniam. Sri Pranav Mehtaji, Sri Deepak Guptaji, who is guiding light for us as far as the Kerala as a hydrogen economy is concerned. Madam Gauri Singh, who is teacher of the Honorable Ambassador to other dignitaries. Let me first start with in our childhood, we used to eat that every day.
Are you getting the voice?
Am I audible?
Yes, now it is better.
Yeah, I will reduce the volume. Yeah, in our childhood, we are told about that every day we should chant on mantra, which will save us from the bad effects. Maybe Kerala being the land of two sages who are associated with the sun god, telling both the Aditya Hridayam, probably the sage Agastya has gone to for the fight against the war. That is, starts with the Chanavishtu Rabam Mitro in the Egypt. That means that you are talking about the renewables, the water, the solar. So the man has to go back to their roots, the source of energy, which is the sun. What is powering the sun? It's the hydrogen to helium conversion, the fusion. So similarly in Gayatri Mantra also the sage Vishwamitra while doing penance there. So since both the sages of Kerala, probably Kerala is the right place to lead as far as the green hydrogen economy is concerned. In fact, let me tell you one or two. Maybe I will talk from the operation side of the practical issues which we are field. We go for the hydrogen economy. So we started initially with probably electric mobility. We found that with 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, up to cars, okay, so you have got you can, it's viable for electric. But beyond that, the buses, trucks, train, or plane, roads, it's not viable because the battery cost is very high, and there are critical challenges of charging in limited time. So we go for NPO battery. So then only the idea of the energy instead of battery as a energy storage medium. It's ideal fuel cell. That's how the concept of fuel cell has come. And then we found that our own refineries, BPCL, Cochin refinery is already producing hydrogen. No, not green hydrogen. They make from the LNG for their own use. Refineries produce almost 3 lakh cubic meters production capacity. So why not increase the production capacity to 4 lakhs and we can use it for the transportation sector. That's how the idea of then we actually here one of the pioneers as far as the solar movement is concerned, because Cochin International Airport is the world's first international airport in the entire world, which is fully run on solar, and we generate another 2,000 units extra, and we gave 76 free charging centers, because anyway solar is free, almost free, because anyway otherwise we have to give to the grid. There are no payment mechanism as of now from the power utility back to the company. So we brought the first solar boat in the country. 4.5 years back, we commissioned it with a French collaboration. A company called Navalt built the first solar electric boat. Now we are going for more such boats. So that is the second stage which of using solar energy for transportation. Now, then we set up the floating solar unit in Cochin International Airport. It's a golf course adjoining, because the approach funnel of the airport, you can't use the land for anything else. So convert into a golf course. And the wastewater which comes out, the treated water is used in the lake. So we put the floating solar in the water body. Now we are able to generate. That's a breakthrough. At 2 rupees power unit, we are able to generate power. That is also with another French collaboration. We could. That is a good model. 2 rupees, we are able to generate power, which can be used. The same water we can convert into hydrogen. So now we are working on the project. We are requested IOC to set up a green hydrogen unit using the solar and power and the water there. So how to convert the water resources into financial resources is so that we can tide over the issues of financial issues as far as the state is concerned. So this is a breakthrough. Now, we found we got a lot of water bodies in Kuttanad. I estimated that 300 megawatt. In fact, another company has come forward to set up floating solar in the entire water bodies in Kuttanad and the dams across the state, where already Banasura Sagar in Wayanad, we have already put a floating solar and we give to the grid. So it's done by a private company on a PPP mode. So that is a potential for generating. Deepak Gupta ji sir was mentioning about the question of constraints about the land and the water. So I think all the water bodies we should put floating solar and generate power. Then one more critical element is that how do you reduce the wheeling charge? So this is additional income for the power utility. So the wheeling charges should be limited. In my opinion, it should be only 50 paise. Maximum you charge it only 1 rupee, so that across the country you are able to generate hydrogen in situ. You can, so that's one suggestion, and the regulator should intervene, and probably national level itself, if the wheeling charges can be capped. So that will be a great breakthrough for the green hydrogen movement. Then grid balancing, it's ideal for grid balancing. In fact, we were just talking about vehicle to grid. It's another concept. In fact, I put the 10 kilowatt solar on my rooftop. So I got zero bill for my electric. I use electric car for last 3 years. I got zero bill for electric for my centralized air conditioning in the house. So virtually I am unaffected whether there is a Suez Canal is closed or there is a oil crisis. It is immaterial for me. I am least worried about how the dollar in the stock market performs, whether the currency fluctuates. Is immaterial as far as I am self-reliant. So we are transforming ourselves from independence to independence. So that is energy independence is quite required, and vehicle to grid we should promote. I think the standards are being worked out so that electric vehicle itself becomes your UPS and electric vehicle will become the generator for your house. So, and micro grids is another emerging area. In fact, we are planning to have, we got a pilot project, and probably I will take five more minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
pilot project we got it sanctioned for two hydrogen cars, hydrogen bus to run between Trivandrum and Cochin. So MRTH has already given the sanction. So we have been working on it, and Toyota has supported their first hydrogen car Ferrari almost 1 year back. Then the approval process, that is where the regulators' role comes to play. So you need a PESO approval because you need high. See, there are three components. One is purification of fuel, that is up to 99.999 up to 4 digits. That's a percentage of purity which is required. Second is you need a compress it up to 150 bar was earlier allowed, now up to 300 bar is permitted. Now thanks to the intervention by the Honorable Union Secretary for MRTH, so we got the approval for the cylinders up to 300 bar to storage. Then compression. The third one is a dispensing unit. The dispensing unit, in fact, BPCL and other companies are now trying to get the PESO approval for the setting up the dispensing unit. So hydrogen being a high energy intensity, will need a lot of discipline. That means the standards are quite high. Probably that is something which is now in the pipeline. Now we are planning that these, apart from this, we go for a pilot project of 50 buses to run between Trivandrum and Cochin. Once the the green hydrogen Cochin International Airport premises is set up by the oil companies. Now, in between, we are not just leaving at the green hydrogen. As a standby, we have got a caustic soda unit at Travancore Cochin Chemicals, which is where hydrogen is a byproduct. So we ask them to just purify that and compress it and give it. So there, the cost comes to roughly around 250 per kg. So now I will just come to the critical challenge. One is okay, increase in demand is one area. Another is cost of electrolyzer, as Madam was mentioning about that. I was just analyzing the cost. The cost of electrolyzer will quickly come to around 650 to 1,000 per kilowatt US dollar. Now, we need to have a 80% reduction. Generally, it says the learning rate is more than 30%. Probably in the solar, our learning rate is beyond 30%. That means when the price of an item decreases when the production is doubled. So, then it is not possible that 80% cost reduction is possible as far as the cost of electrolyzers is concerned. That is one critical challenge. I am sure that if you increase it by double, the cost of electrolyzers will come down by, it should be possible to bring it down as happened in this block. So next, then cost of electricity 5 to 6 cents US dollar per kilowatt hour, that should come to 2 cents. Already we could reduce it. So I think that is quite possible. Man life of the electrolyzer from 10 years it should be almost 20 years. Then the electrolyzer efficiency has to be increased from 65 to 75%. So I think then the plant load factor electrolyzer, that is 3,200 hours per year to 4,200. These are the challenges as far as the bringing down the cost of hydrogen to $1 to $1.5. I think it is possible, but only thing these are the other constraints which need to be addressed. Second part is coming to use in the export sector. We need to make sure that the indigenous you need to have an indigenous production of the fuel cell. So first, one good beginning is that KPH has already developed the first fuel cell, indigenous fuel cell for the cars. So we are working on the buses, and Cochin Shipyard is working on the boats. In fact, we have got a KFW funded project for 75 electric boats, in which we are trying that one of the boats, instead of LTO battery, will replace with the fuel cell. So we are working on it in a collaborative mode. I think that is why the international collaborations between the universities, research institutions, and is a must. Industry, research, academia interface is a very must, as Deepak Gupta sir and Gauri Singh madam was mentioning. So I think this then one or two points is this is the one area which where maybe returns will come in the long run. So you need to have a plan for maybe 10 years, then short term, then long term, maybe 30 to 40 years, maybe by 2050. That means 2030 plan has to be there, 2050 plan has to be there, and in between period, there are 2040 plan we need to make. So it's a long-term vision. So how do you fund it? So you need to have a funding mechanism. So the DFI is a good concept. I was suggesting that that's the best way for such projects which will yield the returns, or it will come in the long run. You need to have either a green bonds or a DFI can be another real way of funding. Then fuel cell, indigenous fuel cell development. One more thing we are just working on is the train. We are going for a high-speed train from one end of to the other. So there we are trying to put green hydrogen as a fuel, just like the ultra ports which Sir was mentioning. Ultra PRTs, hydrogen ports is possible for last mile connectivity. So hydrogen ports, in fact, yesterday one of the IT companies have approached us for vertical landing and takeoff aircrafts which they are designing, which can go up to 450 kilometers. Now, replacing that the battery with hydrogen, then you get a better range. So the flying taxis which are going to be, at least for Kerala, with the constraints on the land, I think that is ideal for us. So we are working on these areas. And India's potential is almost 450 gigawatts by 2030. I think technology collaborations will bring in that change. And one more point I would like to mention is that we need to, as someone has mentioned, we need to have a long-term strategy. How are we going to ensure the supply? So we have got 3 ports, and we have one, the Vizhinjam International Seaport, which by Adani is coming. So the Cochin International Seaport is there. So we will put up pipelines. So what is the plan is that we store the hydrogen in these ports, and pipelines up to 50 kilometers is economically efficient. Also, the cost of laying the pipelines also will be much less. 50 kilometers on either side, so that the India's vision of a gas-based economy, as well as ensuring transition to green hydrogen, will be a reality. And the manufacturing ecosystem has to come, as China has developed it. I think it is possible with bringing all of them together. I think already Madam has mentioned about various ministries how to work together. In fact, the national mission on hydrogen is a great beginning. I'm sure India can lead, and India can become an exporter of energy. That is where I think India will become a superpower or a big economic power. I think that transition, hydrogen is a hero and carbon is zero. So we need to transfer from carbon to hydrogen. That's happening. So let us work on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It is very, very heartening to see that Kerala has taken important and interesting strides in hydrogen. Now, without much delay, I am very happy to invite our next speaker, Mr. Jose Ignacio Sanz. He's a graduate in industrial engineering from Polytech University of Madrid, Spain, and he has over 27 years of global experience in energy sector, having started his career in UK working in R&D of gas. After that, he worked with NGAS, developing the version 0 of Spanish network code, and he joined Total in Spain in 2000 and has held various positions in the gas and power exploration and production branches. He has been the managing director of the gas and power affiliate Total LNG USA in Houston, and of the Total E&P affiliates in Bolivia, United States, and Australia. Currently, he is the Total's Vice President of Gas, Renewables, and Power in India, and is the country chair for Total in the country. He is also on the board of directors for Adani Total Gas Limited, Total Projects India Private Limited, Indian Oil Adani Gas Limited, and last but not the least, Adani Green Energy Limited, which is one of NSCFI's esteemed members. I would now like to request Mr. Jose to deliver his remarks. Mr. Jose, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to greet our distinguished guests, and I would like to thank the organizers for having invited me to give the view of a private company into the fascinating road that India is traveling in the energy transition, and the important role that different ways of new energies, and hydrogen is one of them, is going to play. I'm sorry for the technical glitch, but these things happen in this day and age of some physical limitations. I will start with the India is a big country. It's the second most populated country in the world. and in a few years, it's going to be the most populated country in the world. At the same time, the energy consumption per capita in India is very low. It's way below the world's average. We need to join this element with the significant economic growth that India is having and that it's going to have in the coming years. This is going to make a huge increase in energy demand for India. So how is this surge in energy demand going to be met? The Indian authorities have made very clear that they want to respect the commitments of the country in the Paris Agreement in COP21. They want India to play a central role in the fight against climate change. And the administration in that regard is going to promote new energies. So it's going to promote natural gas, which is a fossil fuel, but it's a transition fossil fuel with much less emissions than oil and than coal. So natural gas is going to go in 10 years from 6.2% in the primary energy matrix to 15%, huge growth. India is promoting as well the development of renewable energy. The target of 450 gigawatts by 2030 is probably the most ambitious one in the world. And that's not all. India is promoting new clean energies, it's promoting biogas. India is promoting hydrogen now with the launch of the National Mission for Hydrogen. And we know what India is capable when India is launching one of these missions. We just need to see the effect and the impact of the mission of renewable energies and where India is today, at the forefront of the world. This role of India is being recognized worldwide. At the beginning of March, in a big energy conference in Houston, in CERAWeek, the Honorable John Kerry spent most of his intervention praising India, praising India's role in this energy transition, and asking the world to support India in this effort that the country is undertaking. So what can a company like Total do in this environment? For us, we have been traditionally an oil and gas company. 2020 was clearly a turning point. And it was a turning point for which there is no going back. Society, the world, is claiming to fight against climate change. And a responsible energy company like us, which we are part of the society, we now need to be at the forefront of this fight. We issued last year our climate ambition, which is to reach net zero emissions together with society in 2050. And to do this, we need to rethink the way in which we work. So Total is now transforming itself. We're into a transformation, and soon there's going to be a change of name in the company by the end of May, and will be named Total Energies. The key point here is that as a company, we need to grow. We need to provide affordable, reliable, and clean energy to our customers. We need to produce more and more energy. But at the same time, we need to reduce our emissions in percentual terms, but as well in absolute terms, if we're going to reach net zero. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that based on 4 pillars. On the one hand, gas. And by gas, it's going to be natural gas. As I said, the cleanest fossil fuel and transition fuel. But we're going to work on biogas and we're going to work on hydrogen. We're going to work on the generation for clean electricity. We're going to still produce low-cost oil. Oil is going to be needed still for years to come. But we're to concentrate in low-cost, not energy-intensive oil. This is not going to be enough in any case to reach our ambition of net zero. So we need to work as well in carbon sinks. And we're going to work in nature-based solutions. And about 10 days ago, we announced a big agreement in Congo to plant a forest of 40,000 hectares that is going to sequester 10 million tons of CO2 in 20 years. And we're working as well in carbon capture, storage, and utilization. As you can see, the path that India has taken, promoting natural gas, renewable energies, hydrogen, is absolutely in line with our strategy. So a company like Total clearly has to be in India. How can we be here? We have been in India since 1993, but our presence in the country really didn't match our ambitions and didn't match the size of the country. So 3 years ago, we started an alliance with a private group, the Adani Group, to jointly develop both companies in the energy sector in India. We started with a joint venture to bring LNG, and we're importing LNG now into India, and we're building a regasification terminal in Dhamra. we participated in Adani Total Gas Limited, which is a city gas distribution company aiming to take natural gas to as many people as possible in the country. Last year, we started a cooperation in solar energy that was materialized early this year in January when we took a 20% participation in Adani Green Energy, which is probably the largest solar promoter in the world. So we can see that Total is becoming very active in India. In the last year, we have invested more than $3 billion in the country, but we want to expand our presence. As we said, we're working on biogas, and together with our partner, we are beginning to explore possibilities to develop biogas and about hydrogen. I agree with the things that have been said today in this forum about the key role that hydrogen is going to play in the future. We in Total, for instance, have started our first big hydrogen project in France, in one of our old refineries. That is now the place where we're going to develop our first big hydrogen project. And when we take a look at India, we see that for hydrogen, there are two key elements. One of them is to get cheap green electricity, and India is clearly the right place for that. The other element is to get customers. As Mr. Gupta said in his intervention, that is a key issue. But this situation is not so different as the LNG market was a few decades ago, when to find anchor customers was key to a lot of the development of the projects. So we have been there. We know how to get customers. We're working on that. So I can see a bright future in India with the launch of the hydrogen mission and the cooperation of private companies like Total. I would like to finish by saying that India has a bright future in the energy transition. India is at the forefront of the fight against climate change. India is an example for many countries on how to do things, how to do this energy transition in this age. And Total is committed to be part of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jose, for your remarks. It is indeed very important for the private sector to contribute to India's hydrogen mission. And we are very happy that Total has been an integral part of India's energy so far, and they'll continue to do so. With this, I would like to thank all the esteemed panelists for sparing their time. First of all, to begin with Ms. Gauri Singh, the Deputy Director General of IRENA. We would like to extend our heartfelt congratulations we wanted to host you in India, and I feel alone in this big stage, but we are closer even when we are farther. I would also like to thank our Director General, Shri Deepak Gupta, who has been a guiding force, and under his supervision and mentorship, I'm very happy to say that in 1 month from now at NSCFI, we are going to launch the National Green Hydrogen Coalition. This will be in response to the National Hydrogen Mission. And we hope that as a private sector, we will be in a position to address and work hand in hand with the government. I would also like to thank Mr. Jyoti Lal from the government of Kerala, which is at the forefront of India's hydrogen economy ambitions, and we hope that Kerala will be leading India's hydrogen proliferation also. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank Mr. Jose Ignacio Sanz for accepting our request and being here. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and looking forward to seeing all of you very soon in person. Thank you.